Hey guys, today we're in Genesis chapter 13. We left off yesterday with Abram and Sarai basically being kicked out of Egypt because of his sin, and now they are heading back. So it says that they went up from Egypt to a place of Negeb, which is the southern part of the promised land, the Negeb desert. Now, Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold, and he journeyed in um, uh, as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai. What's interesting is this is the place where Abraham came in, right? He came into Shechem, the place where God led him to with nothing, right? But he didn't trust God enough for sustaining him. So he goes to Egypt, gets rich, almost loses his wife, almost loses his own life. But now he comes back and he's back at the exact same place that God wanted him to begin with, right? Just shows you how good God is. Um, and then um, we can see that Lot, who was with him in this process, Lot had grown. He'd picked up people and servants and animals. And so now you have two people in a small area with Lot and all of his herdsmen and all his animals, and Abram and all of his herdsmen and all of his animals. And the herdsmen are getting in fights. Abram and Lot are not working well together. Remember, all the way yesterday in chapter 12, God called Abram to leave his kindred, leave his family, and come by himself. But Abram didn't do that. So when we are not following in God's promise, we end up in situations like this. We end up in situations that are sinful and are not holy, and is not what God had intended from the beginning. Verse 7, it says, there was strife between the herdmen. Not only was there strife between Lot and Abram's herdmen, but think of all of the other people in the promised land, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, all these people. Here's Abram going around saying he's worshiping a different God, one God, a God that came to him and is leading him and giving this land. But yet when all the other herdsmen of all these other people see Abram and Lot's people fighting, they're saying they're just like us, right? They're just like us. They're constantly fighting. They're not worshiping one special God. They're just like us. They're being bad witnesses in a land that God has led them to. And so at that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in that land, being bad witnesses. And Abram said to Lot, he said, hey, you go where you go. There's not enough space. This isn't working out. If you go left, I'll go right. Lot, if you go right, I'll go left. What's interesting here, it shows the love and the compassion of Abraham. Abraham was the eldest, so he should have got to chosen if he wanted to go left or he wanted to go right, but he was being nice. And at this time, as he's left Egypt, he's learned his lesson. He's come back to the altar. He's been worshiping God. And so now he's starting to trust God even more, right? So he tells Lot, wherever you go, God's going to take care of me. And so it says, you go left, I'll go right, whatever it is. And notice in verse 10, it says, and Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered, where like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. Lot is not following God spiritually like Abram is. So Lot looks up, and with his physical eyes, he looks to the eastern bank of the Jordan. He looks at what we would call today modern day Jordan. And he looks over there and he says, man, this is great. This is a great valley. It's hilly, especially if you get to the north side of Israel, the Golan Heights, some of those. It's a really great area. Lots of grass, lots of streams. And he said, I want that, because physically it looked good, right? Because he wasn't looking spiritually. He didn't care what God wanted. And so he does. He takes the eastern side. He went right, and Abram said, fine, I will stay here and I will go left. In verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, notice that, after Lot had left, and now it is Abram, just Abram and Sarah. It's exactly what God wanted all the way back in Genesis 11. But now, through Abram's trials and situations and not having faith in God, now we're back to where God really wanted, just God and just Abram. Then after he separated, he said, lift up your eyes and look to the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward, for all the land that you will see. Notice, I will give. This is all of God's doing. The promised land was all of God giving. This is reminding him of the promise that God had already made him. Not only that, he says, verse 16, and I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. Can you imagine counting dust? It's just saying, I'm going to make your descendants countless. There's going to be so many of them, nobody will be able to count them. Verse 17, arise and walk through the length and the breadth of the land, and I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre and are at Hebron, where he built an altar. What's interesting is he says, God tells Abram, you need to walk through the land. You need to go north. You need to go all the way south. You need to go all the way east. You need to go all the way west. This is the exact thing that God tells us. God is telling Abram to walk through the blessings, walk through the provisions that he has given him. Today, even though we're not Abram and God is not promising us a land, God gives us his word. And he says, hey, walk through my word from the north to the south, to the east and to the west. Walk through the expanse of my word and you will know my blessings, right? So you can start to see why it's important that we read from the beginning to the end of the Bible. So Abram moved and he comes to a place settled by the oaks named Mamre. Mamre means vision. And then he, which is at Hebron. Hebron means commission, comes together to congregate with one another. And there he built an altar of the Lord. So notice, anywhere that Abram goes, he builds an altar. He is there worshiping God. So we can see at the beginning, Abram was kind of faithful and had some issues, but now we're starting to see a more faithful and a more listening Abram to the voice of God. I hope that makes sense. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter 14. God bless.